Check 1, 2. All right.
Good afternoon, friends. Welcome to the Professional Staff Congress Union Hall. Before we begin the event, you may be wondering, where am I? Which mayoral forum is this? The candidates may be wondering, which mayoral forum is this? Welcome, Comptroller Lander. So before I turn the floor over to my colleagues in the CUNY Rising Alliance, I just wanted to welcome you on behalf of the Professional Staff Congress, the union that represents 30,000 faculty and professional staff at the 11 senior colleges, the 8 graduate and professional schools, and most importantly for this conversation, the 7 community colleges all across the City University of New York. My name is James Davis. I'm a faculty member at Brooklyn College, and I've had the privilege for the past 3 years, go Brooklyn, to serve as the president of the PSC. And in the PSC, we know, because we live it every day, that our working conditions are our students' learning conditions. And that's why we are really proud to be a founding member of the coalition that is the CUNY Rising Alliance, a really strong coalition of student organizations, community organizations, and labor that struggles for improvements to the largest public urban university system in the country. The mayor is a critical position in relation to the City University of New York. And so without further ado, I want to turn this evening's program over to the hosts in CRA. I want to thank the candidates for coming here today to speak with us. And I want to thank you all for coming out for this important forum. Thank you and welcome.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Arturo Humberto Namorado. I'm a full-time lecturer at Kingsborough Community College, PhD student at CUNY Graduate Center, CUNY alum, and a member of the PSC Legislative Committee, and also I'm a proud third-generation member of organized labor.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kit Lee. I'm a graduating senior at the City College of New York studying history and literature. I'm also a liaison for the CUNY Rising Alliance. The CUNY Rising Alliance is a coalition of students, faculty, workers, and communities fighting for free and quality CUNY. We build off of CUNY's historical importance in student activism and its ability to provide social mobility to working class communities and communities of color. In recent years, CUNY's budget has had millions of dollars cut, resulting in less faculty and staff and a lower quality education for students. From these budget cuts, organizers have advocated for the New Deal for CUNY bill, which restores free tuition and over 5 years establishes minimum staff to student ratio for mental health counselors, academic advisors, and full-time faculty at CUNY, while professionalizing compensation for adjunct faculty. The CRA coalition groups helping us with this event are the Young Invincibles, NYPIRG, U Aspire, the University Student Senate, and the PSC.
Here are tonight's ground rules for today's event. Each candidate will have 1 minute for opening and closing statements. The moderators, myself and Kit, will ask you the same 6 questions, and each will have 90 seconds for you to respond. To my left, PSC Secretary Andrea Vasquez will keep time and give you 15 notification, as well as ring the bell when time is up. Please, for audience, picture and filming is entirely allowed, but please mute your devices to avoid disruptions, and as well as try to hold your applause till the end. We have reached out to all mayoral candidates in the Democratic primary, and we're grateful for those who took time to be here today. Some may be running late, but we will still continue on schedule. While this forum does not have audience questions as part of it, we did take questions that many of you submitted and have incorporated those questions and formulated them together with our coalition groups.
Now we will hear opening statements from the candidates. Please introduce yourselves. You will all have 1 minute, starting with State Senator.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. All right. I'm State Senator Zelnor Myrie. I took the 5 train to get here, and some of you may know that 2 stops on that 5 train have been renamed from Franklin Avenue and President Street to Franklin Avenue - Mega Everest College, President - Mega Everest College. That was a bill that I shared with then Assemblymember Diana Richardson to get across the finish line because I was very proud to represent Mega Everest College. Not only is the place that my wife went to Head Start, she graduated from that institution, and it is where her mom graduated from. That is what CUNY represents to our communities. They aren't just schools. They aren't just buildings. These are institutions in our communities that are pillars. And everyone, students, faculty, everyone involved should have the investment and the full resources that our city can give to them. That's what I want to do as the next mayor.
Well, good evening. My name is Scott Stringer, former New York City Comptroller. And for my family, the history is decades long in terms of what CUNY represents. My parents went to City College. They met at City College. It was a love story until they got divorced. But I'm a CUNY graduate, and so many people who I grew up with in Washington Heights are CUNY graduates. It is a very powerful institution. It's an entry level for all things that are possible. And I believe we need a mayor who's finally going to care about CUNY. And it's time we prevented a candidate for mayor who defunded CUNY to have any chance to become mayor. This is our moment to set this right, because if we don't, the consequences for not just the professors, the adjuncts, the real crisis will be for the kids and the kids we don't know who are coming to the city and will use CUNY as an aspirational opportunity for their own economic benefit. It's an honor to be here with all of you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Zohran Kwame Mamdani. It is such a pleasure to be here with you, and specifically on the topic of CUNY, which was a crown jewel of our public education system. And I say was because of the systemic defunding that has taken place at both the city and state levels that has prevented it from being described as such today. We have seen with our own eyes, and we have heard from our own constituents about the extreme measures that have been taken by both Mayor Adams and Governor Cuomo to defund CUNY's abilities to both provide the classes that are necessary to graduate, to give adjuncts stability, they know that they will actually have a job, and to provide the capital funding such that students are not sitting in class as tiles fall around them. This is all the result of decisions that have been made by disgraced New York executives, both of whom are not here today. But it is not the only option that we have. And this is our opportunity to tell New Yorkers that they can choose more than just the past or the present, they can choose the future. And I'm so excited to be here with you to talk about our vision to make this institution the crown jewel once again. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm New York City Controller Brad Lander. Thank you to CUNY Rising Alliance and PSC CUNY and the other sponsors. I'm proud to be here tonight. I've been proud to be out with you on the picket lines and in the streets and at the New Deal for CUNY rallies and up in Albany at the CUNY luncheon and fighting against Eric Adams' $95 million of baseline cuts. We did not one, but 2 reports on the difference CUNY makes and why those cuts are foolish in every single way. And I think, I think I've been at every CUNY campus in my time as controller. I love going to the graduations. If I tell you the story of watching Yaris Lopez graduate from Lehman College last spring, I'm gonna start crying, so we'll see if I get to that later. Because CUNY really is the greatest vehicle for upward social social mobility and inclusive multiracial democracy, bar none. And I'm running for mayor to make the city work for working people. So we'll have a mayor who will stand up against Donald Trump's assault on higher education and immigration and New York's values, and to invest in places like CUNY that make New York, New York. Thanks you. Thanks.
Thank you. For your first question, you will have 90 seconds to answer. A bit of context. Under the current mayoral administration, CUNY community colleges have experienced hiring freezes, program reductions, and overall austerity budgets stemming from drastic cuts of over $95 million. Legally speaking, 33% of the budget for CUNY community colleges should come from the city, and 40% should come from the state. However, for many years, the state has not met its statutory obligation to fund community colleges. Your question, as mayor, how will you ensure CUNY community colleges receive city funding and state support they need to fully be resourced and allow our students to thrive? We'll begin with Comptroller Brad Lander.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I will commit as mayor to restore that $95 million of New York City funding and baseline that funding so CUNY isn't begging every year for the resources it deserves to have from New York City. And then we've got to go win more from New York State. That is support for New Deal for Community. For CUNY, that's support for the repair campaign, legislation sponsored by Assemblymember Mamdani, to provide some additional resources by collecting real estate taxes that NYU and Columbia are not paying. I would like to get back to New York City municipal control of CUNY, which we had before the fiscal crisis, but we have to keep the state paying the level of resources that it has historically been obligated to provide. And the way to do that is to work alongside the people who are fighting. That's why it's great to be with PSC CUNY and CUNY Rising Alliance and CUNY alumni. That is the force that is needed to build a strong enough coalition. One other thing I'll do at the city level, while we're working to get to New Deal for CUNY, is put city resources in for CUNY for CUNY students who are going to be New York City public servants. So if you're going to be a New York City public school teacher, a third of our teachers come from CUNY. We should have a tuition program that means you don't have to pay any tuition if you go on to become a New York City teacher or public hospital nurse. You work for 5 years, we pay it all off.
So when it comes to the city budget, as the mayor of this city, I would have the control to ensure that we actually deliver on those promises and reverse the policies, the austerity that Eric Adams has imposed upon CUNY, austerity predicated on a false narrative about our finances, and yet ones that still students and teachers and staff have to suffer with. And at the state level, I have served, I'm now in my 3rd term in the Assembly in Albany, and I have seen this mayor take a bully pulpit that has been described as the 2nd most powerful one in this country to come to Albany and fearmonger and ask for the rollback of civil rights protections for Black and brown New Yorkers. What if we had a mayor who used that same bully pulpit to go to Albany and instead take every ounce of oxygen, devoting it to how the state needs to fulfill what is its own requirements? I think we have yet to see that potential because we have not seen a glimpse of it under Eric Adams, and I would commit to doing that because we know that this funding is the difference for whether or not students can graduate. I've spoken to students myself who've been forced to enroll for semester after semester because their required class isn't being offered anymore because it's been cut due to some kind of allegation of under-enrollment, when we know actually also a lot of times what happens is there isn't money for the salaries of those teachers. These are all false, artificial impositions upon our city, upon CUNY, and we can reverse them if we have the political will.
Look, folks, we're doing this all backwards. We're constantly on the defensive. CUNY is crumbling before our eyes. We don't have, as Zoran mentioned, classes for the people who need to graduate, so people stay longer, pay more. We don't have an infrastructure that is futuristic for CUNY. And the one thing we are not getting across to the power elite is that CUNY is an economic driver of this city. Think about the report I did with PSC CUNY just a couple of years ago. You know what we found? $57 billion is what CUNY graduates earn. $4-5 billion in taxes paid. And if this was an elite Ivy League school, right, they would be parading all their upper earning graduates, and it wouldn't match what CUNY graduates contribute to the city economy. So it's time to stop going to Albany and begging. It's time to come up with a pro-CUNY agenda. We should make, at least now, two-year colleges free, because that's the gateway. We should look at the infrastructure of CUNY and say to ourselves, if we could get this right, we can create not just a whole new economy, but a human infrastructure that could be very powerful. CUNY students are on food lines. CUNY students are having trouble paying the rent. And that's why they're not graduating within 4 years. And we have to change that, but it can't be because we acquiesce to the budget cutters like Eric Adams and Andrew Cuomo, the people who devastated our ramp up of CUNY.
Every time we propose investments in things that help working people, the question is always, well, how much is that going to cost and how are we going to pay for it? But we never frame this as an investment, because we know that we will get a return for this multifold in our city and in our state. Look at what's happening in our classrooms today. Our newest New Yorkers who arrived about 3 years ago don't have enough teachers that can teach English as a second language, because we have not invested on the front end on where those teachers come from. CUNY, right here. We have not given enough. We have not provided incentives. We have not provided tuition assistance. We have not made it easy for them to make their way to our classrooms. And so now we're struggling writ large. This is happening all over. And I think it is incumbent on the mayor to view this not simply as a budgetary cost, but as an investment in New York City's future. I am the proud son of a teacher who taught special education for 22 years, who attended CUNY, who had that benefit and was able to provide that benefit for so many others. So not only would we restore the cuts, but think about how we could be proactive on further investment so that we can get exactly what we need as a city back in return.
Thank you all for your answers. The New Deal for CUNY is a state bill that provides holistic solutions to decades of austerity. It calls for free tuition, more mental health counselors and academic advisors, more full-time faculty, pay parity for adjuncts, and funding for infrastructure. This critical piece of legislation would cost $1.2 billion over 5 years. Do you support the New Deal for CUNY, and what would you do as mayor to get it passed at the state level? We will start with Assemblymember Mamdani.
I've been a proud supporter of the New Deal for CUNY for every term that I've been in office. And I look back fondly on the many meetings that I had, especially with PSC, with Andrea, with Bettina, with James, with Jen, strategizing as to how can we make the most effective case. Because the beauty of the New Deal for CUNY is that it speaks to the crisis at CUNY at every single level. It's not simply about capital. It's not simply about operating. It's also about tuition. It's also about mental health. It's also about counselors. And the issue that we had is that it was being measured against the context that Andrew Cuomo left us, a context where every year was cut after cut after cut. And so we were seeing that anything that was not that was framed as if it was a positive development, but PSC was always there to remind us that we did not have the time to simply incrementally improve from where Cuomo left us. We have to transform our public higher education system here in New York City. And I'm proud of those meetings and the work that we did, but at its core, we have still not done enough. And I think what I would be able to do as the mayor is to add a much louder voice to that same call, to make it clear that We stand with CUNY students, with CUNY faculty, with CUNY staff in asking for the bare minimum. And while pursuing that, I'm proud, as Controller Lander was saying, to have worked with Controller Lander and with the incredible students that are here on the repair campaign to introduce legislation that would repeal the property tax exemption for Columbia and NYU and redirect the $328 million they do not pay in property taxes to CUNY to supplement what it is that we would provide as a city and a state.
When I served in the state assembly, when we actually had a Republican Senate, and when a lot of social justice issues came to the forefront and groups would come to Albany, they would go directly to the legislators they trusted the most, and I was one of them, just like you are today. And they would talk about how we needed to fight to get needed restorations. I think what's missing in this today among friends sometimes is everybody says they support you when you're in the room, and when you leave the room, a couple of people get back in the room, and somehow the agenda doesn't get met. And this is where a mayor plays a critical role, because sometimes it's not just about the bully pulpit. Sometimes it's actually about political action. You got to say to folks, even your friends, look, if you're not going to deliver for the students and for this multi-billion-dollar economic engine that has paid dividends to families and people who come to our city, then it's time for you to have a primary. It's time for you not to get an endorsement. The problem is incumbency protection, and I've been one of the beneficiaries as an assembly member of incumbent protection, is nobody wants to say, we don't like you. I remember in Albany when the budget fight was such that a group came to see me, and I said, so what do you want me to do? They said, well, we love you. And I said, well, don't you want me to vote against the budget? You would do that? I said, would you ask me? And that's what we have to change. We need to empower our legislators in the city to have the wherewithal to get out there and say we must get the result. And I would try to do that politically as mayor. Thank you.
Look at what we're spending taxpayer money on right in this moment. $60 million to defend Andrew Cuomo against sexual harassment allegations. When he was governor, he gave away $1 billion in taxpayer money to Elon Musk for quote unquote economic development in Buffalo. We have not seen the return on that. So we have the resources to do this. We just got to step up and get it done. So that's what I'd be doing as mayor. I've been a proud co-sponsor of the New Deal for CUNY in the state Senate. I'm going to continue to advocate and agitate for that in my current role, and I would continue to do that as the next mayor.
Yes, I absolutely support the New Deal for CUNY. I've been proud to be out there with you at the rallies each of the many past years. And I think there's a set of steps we can take. As I've said, first, let's restore the $95 million that Eric Adams cut. Let's be clear, that's from just his term in office. He cut $95 million that has hit ASAP, that has hit CUNY Reconnect, that has meant there's less faculty in the community colleges that the mayor can do to restore. That's not New Deal for CUNY, but mayor could do that in year one. Let's do the repair bill, $327 million. Again, a good next step toward the New Deal for CUNY. And then I do think while we're working our way to free tuition overall, picking a couple of these public service professions that are so good for New York City. Half of our nurses come from CUNY, a third of our public school teachers, more and more of our, the folks who kind of both take care of New York City and the healthcare professions, of the tech workers. In our office, Baruch is the biggest channel of accountants for the folks who manage the city's budget and invest our pension funds and manage our municipal finance. That's in so many ways what CUNY has been in each of the different schools, is a vehicle for the work that New York City gets done. Let's start with those professions to make sure if you work for New York City, we cover your tuition as we keep building toward that New Deal for all.
For our third question, PSC Secretary Andre Vasquez will ask.
Good evening. The Trump administration is using the threat of massive federal funding cuts to colleges and universities to eliminate diversity, equity, and inclusion programming and stifle free speech, academic freedom, and freedom to assemble. As mayor, how would you protect New York City and CUNY from federal funding cuts and defend the freedom to speak and to learn from a range of perspectives, a right that is crucial to a quality higher education?
So look, this is a very serious and real challenge. And I believe that the next mayor must be able to play chess, not checkers, with Washington, the state, and the city. Here's what I would do immediately. First, we've seen the $80 million clawback already. I believe more of that's coming. I've called for a $1 billion set aside, $500 million from the state, $500 million from the city, a $1 billion fund. You can't legally do it because we have a reserve fund, but we would put that money aside to immediately supplement the funding that's being cut. We have to identify the $2 or so billion in education that's on the chopping block potentially, but we have to be able to refill the gap, because if we don't do that, our social service and social justice network will collapse. Second, the banks that let the clawback happen, I want to bring them in. And as a former controller, and say to them, you make millions of dollars with our deposits. How dare you not develop an early warning system to let mayors and other elected officials know what is happening? You don't wake up one day and say, we've wiped out immigration, we've wiped out education. And I think we have to have a different conversation with our powerful institutions who make real bank on our deposits and on our money. And I think we have to rearrange the deck here a little bit. Lastly, what I would say is I went through Trump 1, and it wasn't pretty. But I know that while building a coalition, we can get there, get the Democrats back in Congress, and start to end this in 18 months.
We are certainly going to be facing challenges as Trump continues to propose and the Republicans continue to support cuts that are direct attacks on the city. But I should stand? Okay. Okay, what's up, everybody in the back? But I'm also a lawyer, and I'm pretty familiar with our Constitution. And this president is putting our Constitution in the shredder. And he's daring us to stand up. He's bullying New York City. And our mayor is saying nothing, getting pushed around. And I don't know about y'all, I'm born and raised here. I'm from Brooklyn. Anybody that puts their hands on me, I'm swinging back. And the mayor of this city has to swing back. It's coming after our people. Stand up. We're not always going to get it right. We might not always have the statutory authority. Okay, all right. But people want to see that you can fight and that you're willing to punch for this city. And that's what I'm going to do as the next mayor.
This is a 5-alarm fire for our democracy, let's be clear, to have ICE come onto campuses and arrest Mahmoud Khalil for speech at a protest and then say to Columbia, we're going to take $400 million unless you violate the civil rights of your students, and threaten to weaponize funding against higher education in the ways that they are doing. That's not just a danger for some students. That's not just a danger for some universities. That is a danger for New York City. That is a danger for American democracy. And we got to stand up and call it out together. We're not going to like what everyone says at every single protest, but the First Amendment protects that speech. And we have to fight back in the ways we're talking about. It was my office that discovered that $80 million that Elon Musk swiped from our bank accounts, and I forced the law department into court because Eric Adams wouldn't do it, to sue to get our money back. We are going to get that $80 million back because we're standing up for the rule of law and for this city. And New York City could take big leadership here. You know, there used to be a Department of Higher Education. We convene the culturals, we convene the museums, we convene the libraries, we convene the parks. We should convene the universities and colleges, CUNY the biggest one, but all of the others as well, to remind them of the value of liberal higher education, its role in this city, and its responsibilities to our constitutional democracy.
What we are seeing is a fundamental assault on our First Amendment rights. And the empty chairs of Andrew Cuomo and Eric Adams at every forum is befitting the responses that they gave to the dragging, the disappearing, and the detention of Mahmoud Khalil. Eric Adams has said nothing to the effect of whether or not he believes Mahmoud Khalil should be released. And Andrew Cuomo took 72 hours before putting out a statement that none of us understood as to whether where he stood on this question. And then after another 24 hours, he put out another statement walking it back. That is the lack of a spine that is evident in our disgraced leaders of this city and this state. And we need to turn the page on them. And in doing so, we have to understand that collaboration and cowardice have won us nothing. All it has led us to is a point where $80 million is being taken out of a bank account. And that's true also for Columbia University leadership, who has just fired the president of UAW Region 9A's local on that campus for participation in those same protests. And so we have to make it clear that as the next mayor of this city, we will stand up to attempts at repressing political speech, whether they come from Washington, whether they come from these institutions, or whether they come from the governor telling CUNY that they have to stop advertising a course on Palestine. It has to be consistent. It has to be across the board.
Okay, this next question will be asked by Sean Miller from Young Invincibles.
I'm gonna go Next question is gonna be asked by Daniel Redden, the University Student Senate Chairperson and Student Trustee of CUNY. It's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you for your time and your commitment to not only New York City, but to CUNY. And so my question is, students have shared that transportation costs are a major barrier getting to and staying in college. So will you support free Metro cards for CUNY students with a budget line item? For this question, you have 1 minute to give us a yes or no answer and a brief explanation. And we'll start with City Comptroller and we're going to wait.
I think it may be on me now.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, well, there you go.
Great.
Thank you.
Look at this collaboration, y'all. The short answer is yes. I will fully support it with a budget item. I get around by public transit. I take the train. I take the bus. I do not drive. And so this is really, really important that all of our students benefit from it. Some of our students do right now, and we see what the benefits of having that free transportation is. I'm someone that was born and raised in this city. Back in the day, you used to have a bus pass that you had to show the bus driver to get on, and that was everything for you. You had your little 2-3 rides growing up, and you had to make your way around. I think that all of our CUNY students should have that. I'd be proud to support it.
I did. Good evening, everybody. Buenas noches. Pardon. Yes, absolutely. Hi, everybody. I'm Jessica Ramos, State Senator from Queens, the current chair of the Labor Committee in the New York State Senate. Thank you all for galvanizing us all here. I apologize for my tardiness. I had a lapse in childcare and had to figure that out, but managed to get here as quickly as I could. That being said, as the mother of 2 growing boys, they're 11 and 13, who are now taking the subway by themselves, I think about very often what their first interactions with the NYPD might be like. And usually that happens for us New York City kids on the subway. So making sure that students have access to Metro cards, if we still call them that, they're also Omni cards, I suppose. We want to make sure that we are eliminating any chance of a negative interaction with the NYPD for students. That's first and foremost. I'm still in mom mode, what I'm thinking about. But really, it's also about making sure that nobody has to jump turnstiles or have to, embark on any other behavior except focusing on your studies, which is what we want our students to do. So I would be very supportive of that measure.
We'll continue with Comptroller Brad Lander. You'll have 1 minute for this question asked by Daniel Redden.
This question here, yes, good, okay. When I was in the city council, I was proud to be one of the early supporters of Fair Fares, which has produced half-price Metro cards, which I get is not as good as just what our high school students have. But realistically, given the number of CUNY students that I would like to see this expanded to, Fair Fares, I think, is the model for expanding so that we could cover a wider range of both low-income New Yorkers, seniors. But yes, it should absolutely be available to all CUNY students, and I will work hard to get that in the New York City budget. A few other things that we could do to make transportation smoother for CUNY students, and that includes, for example, expanding City Bike. Some city funds need to go in City Bike. So if you're at Kingsborough, it's a long way from the subway station out to Kingsborough. It'd be so easy to have some City Bikes at both the subway station and on the campus. Same is true out at CSI. At CSI, they actually want some, the bus stop is so far from the edge of the campus, and I've been talking to the MTA about routes that'll get you there. There's a lot we can do to make transportation easier for CUNY students.
Absolutely. I would, as the next mayor of the city, do that line item. And I think what that also speaks to is the fact that right now, 1 in 5 New Yorkers cannot afford a Metro card. And that's at the current fare of $2.90. That fare is set to rise this summer to $3. And one of the cornerstones of my campaign, the entire campaign is about making the city more affordable. And one of the cornerstones is public transit, specifically bus transit, and a pledge to make every bus in this city the slowest buses in the country, to instead make them a model for this nation by making them fast and free. That is a commitment that would transform the lives of the more than 1 million New Yorkers who ride those buses every day. It is a commitment built upon the successes I've seen firsthand, having launched and won the Fix the MTA campaign in Albany, and I won't tell you why we named it that. A campaign that won a fare-free bus pilot that made one bus route free in each borough. And what we saw was an increase in ridership by up to 38%, a decrease in assaults on bus drivers by about 39%, and the most significant increase in ridership coming from New Yorkers who made $28,000 or less every year. This is the key to unlocking the city. So we have to create that line item, and we also have to create that same expansiveness for every New Yorker when they take the bus.
The free Metro card is not just about CUNY students just going to and from class, go home, come back. Most CUNY students have to work. Most CUNY students have to pick up kids at daycare. Most CUNY students do not have the traditional education route, and a lot of CUNY students simply don't have the money. Some are homeless, some are almost homeless, and the services they need is very powerful. So free Metro card is the least we can do. But there's another part of it, which is, education is not just in the classroom. Education is at libraries and museums and cultural institutions. And education is no longer Manhattan living in Manhattan, right? It's about this sprawling university network that we have to commit and connect our students to. So I feel very strongly about this. Like Jessica, I have a 13-year-old and 11-year-old, and they are just starting to take the train. I don't feel good about it. I'm one of those dads. I'm sorry. But I will tell you, I'm starting to realize that the power of the Metro card for those kids before they go to college means their eyes are now going to be open to the things that they couldn't do, but now that they can. And I think it's very powerful. Thank you.
Thank you. So I would like to call to attention to bring 1 minute each for both State Senator Jessica Ramos and former Assemblymember Michael Blake. You will have 1 minute to introduce
I'm
yourselves,
modern voice first.
and then we'll continue with the questions.
Well, good evening again, everyone. Like I said, I'm Jessica Ramos, State Senator representing District 13 in Queens. I'm the proud chair of the Labor Committee in the New York State Senate, and I have been a partner on a New Deal for CUNY for my entire tenure in the New York State Senate. I think one of the biggest mistakes I've made in life was not to go to CUNY, and I knew better because my older sister is a graduate from Hunter College. So I know the value of CUNY. I've seen it firsthand. And CUNY is a very big part of the plans that I have for the future of our city. I plan on calling for a mental health emergency on day one of my mayoralty. And for that, I want to be able to plug into all of the tools we need to build the workforce pipeline that we've been lacking in the mental health disciplines. I want to be able to have more social workers from the Silverman School, but I also want to make sure that we have psychotherapists, cognitive and behavioral therapists in the languages that New Yorkers speak so that we can build out the system that does not exist, reopening a lot of the mental health institutions that Andrew Cuomo closed over a decade ago, and weaving mental health into our school systems from universal childcare through CUNY into our senior centers, and of course, be able to also weave it into our workplaces. So I'm hoping that you'll be my partner in that and more. Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good to see everybody, and always good to be everyone. My name is Michael Blake. I'm running to be your next mayor because we have to address the true cost of living. I'm running for your next mayor because we deserve better than what we have right now. We're running because we want to do things differently and better for all of our people across New York City. How do we do that? First and foremost, let's honor and respect CUNY the way we need to. I'm a kid that grew up in the Bronx, PS 79, 118, DeWitt Clinton High School. Where I grew up across the street was BCC, Bronx Community College. I saw that firsthand. I do believe that every student that goes to our New York City high school should have an automatic acceptance to CUNY, and we should make CUNY free again. We got to go a step further and understanding that we have to think about middle-class housing and also housing for all that are there, because if you can't pay your child care and you can't pay for housing, how can you realize your dreams? And so when we do all of this, it's around a reimagined vision. And so if you want to see more of what we're trying to do, I ask that you join us on our vision at blakefornyc.com to see how we can make things better. I will say proactively, I will have to depart early. Unfortunately, we have a family funeral happening this evening. So if you see me cut out, that is the reason why. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to repeat one question that I asked right before the senator and the assembly member arrived for you to have the opportunity to answer it. The Trump administration is using the threat of massive federal funding cuts to colleges and universities to eliminate diversity, equity, and inclusion programming and to stifle free speech, academic freedom, and freedom to assemble. As mayor, how would you protect New York City and CUNY from federal funding cuts and defend the freedom to speak and to learn from a range of perspectives, a right that is crucial to quality higher education? You have 90 seconds to answer.
Well, unlike Vice President Eric Adams, I would actually stand up for you right now and do the steps that are necessary here, where you have a mayor that is absolutely compromised, and a lot of reasons we actually are not pushing back. So first and foremost, let's talk this through. There should be no business at all for ICE coming to our schools, coming into places of worship, coming to our community centers. None of that should be acceptable at all. We should not be allowing people in, and we should be standing down against that. Equally, you have an attack on anti-Blackness that is consistently happening, as well as anti-Latino communities that we have to speak into existence and be very direct about it. You have a white supremacy agenda that's happening from Donald Trump and Elon Musk, which is why they're attacking us in this way. They are only going after funding after people of color and anyone they seem as marginalized. And so we have to go a step further. If they continue to come for us, we should come for them. And I've said very consistently, they want to cut off our funding. We should not send federal taxes to DC. It doesn't make any sense at all for us to be doing that. And so we take these steps to ensure that. Why is this relevant? Because we should not be having this conversation without recognizing it in totality. Think about how the Department of Education this week had workforce slashed. People are wondering right now if they're going to have their jobs. So going a step further around what we have to do. We can understand you cannot talk about U.S. history without talking about Black history. You can't talk about U.S. history without talking about Latino history and women's history, and all intertwined. We would expand out the work of what I've done here. I created the My Brother's Keeper program here in New York State when I was the Assembly member. We are still the only state in the country to have that. I will continue that work and expand that out so that we ensure, not just through CUNY, but across all of our city, that we embrace who we are as opposed to what Trump and others are doing right now.
Well, I agree with a lot of what former Assemblyman Blake said. I mean, what is happening from the federal government is tyrannical. There is no excuse to make for it. The minute a student is disappeared, like what happened to Mahmoud Khalil in Columbia University, without even his attorney knowing for over 24 hours where he had been imprisoned, that reminded me of when Pinochet would disappear people in Chile. Very, very scary stuff. So making sure that we have a plan in place to protect our students, to be able to protect our college campuses as places where our students can experiment with their right to a free speech is really, really important. It is the only way that I believe that we can obtain the level of diplomacy that is needed for true peace. And we should talk about that. We should be able to protect our students and everyone in our public institutions, hospitals, houses of worship from ICE. I too am the proud daughter of immigrants. My parents came from Colombia in the 70s. I was fortunate to be born and raised here, but I have seen even how ICE over the past few weeks has even tried to deport American citizens, Puerto Ricans, veterans of war. And so what we're seeing is not normal, and we have to make sure not to normalize it. And students play a very pivotal role in making sure that we are not normalizing that and that we're standing up to the tyranny. Thank you.
Now this next question will be asked by Young Invincibles' Sean Miller.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sean Miller, Northeast Regional Director at Young Invincibles. My question is the following. Recent executive orders threaten immigrant students and CUNY workers and their families. Almost all of CUNY's institutions are Hispanic serving institutions, HSIs, and a third of CUNY students are immigrants. What will you do as mayor to protect and support our students and all New Yorkers from possible ICE incursions onto campuses and communities?
And we will start with former Comptroller Stringer.
Well, this is truly where the rubber meets the road. We have never been in a situation quite like this, where out of nowhere, a student, protesting or not, can be taken away, deep sixed somewhere in far enough place with no guarantee that he can come back or she can come back. This is where Eric Adams has let us down. Because rather than mobilize and organize, rather than work to make sure that our own law enforcement agencies are doing everything they can to draw the line in the sand, he has basically capitulated to somebody who is literally trying to rewrite the Constitution of the United States. This mayor, the next mayor, has a special obligation to our immigrants, to our people who came here in peace, fleeing persecution. You know, the truth is, in this city, there are very different opinions. People come from different places. People have different views of the world. People have cultural differences. But when you're a New Yorker in this town, when you hit our soil, we protect each other. It may not always seem like that, right? But I want you to know that somebody who was raised probably differently than many people in this audience, that I never believe that we do not have each other's back. It started for me in the schoolyard in Washington Heights, and it's true today. And I just want to pledge to you, legally, politically, if I'm successful at being mayor, I will join with you to make sure that we have zero tolerance for stealing our people, from destroying families, separating children. If that was my kid that had a threat of being taken away, let me tell you something, I wouldn't sleep again forever. And I believe that. Thank you.
Senator Myrie.
You don't have to be a lawyer. You don't have to be a constitutional scholar. You don't have to be a legal expert to know that what is happening today is wrong. And it's scary because they're daring us to respond. On Saturday, it was the disappearing. On Wednesday, it was subpoenas from the Department of Justice to our hotels. Information on the asylum seekers and the city workers that helped them. Information on where the funding is coming from. It's tyranny, authoritarianism, and it's incremental. So you have to not give an inch. You have to not give an inch. Because if you give him the inch, he's gonna take the mile. This used to not be political, New York City being a sanctuary city. Rudy Giuliani defended our sanctuary city status. Give me a break. Get a backbone. Have a spine. My parents were undocumented when they had me. They took me to Kings County Hospital when I had asthma. If this were today, they would fear for their lives to take me to the hospital. That cannot be the city that we live in. So I'm gonna stand up as the mayor. I'm gonna use our law department, not just on the defense, but to go on offense. And I'm gonna ensure we're gonna uphold our sanctuary city laws and our sensitive areas wherever they are.
Former Assembly.
We first have to make it clear that the conversation around immigration involves all of us, and we cannot allow what the Republicans are doing to make it a Latino-only conversation. I'm a son of Jamaican immigrants. It's about Latino and Caribbean and African and Asian, all of us intertwined, because when we embrace that, then we all fight for one another. To your question, specifically, what do we need to do? First and foremost, we have to make sure that the unconstitutional behavior of ICE is not allowed into our places, and make it very clear that someone, unless they have a warrant from a judge, is not permitted in. Second, we got to make sure there's increased language access actually at protections for our individuals, because too often the conversations are only in English, but how do you help our communities in a very real way? Third, you got to collaborate with partners such as Africans coming together and others, because 180,000 immigrants right now are showing up without legal representation and therefore don't have someone to fight for them. How is it that we have a $115 billion city budget, but we're not actually making sure our people are being protected? So then when you take these kinds of steps, it will ensure the humanity of who we are as a people. But then also, it's about demonstrating what are we doing further. And it can't just be that all things are bad. Yes, we understand that, but how are we helping more people get acclimated? So when someone is coming here, that means that our funds are available to help our immigrant families the same way they're helping us here, because we had the $115 billion budget before our immigrant brothers and sisters came here in the first place. Don't allow the scapegoating to happen and how Republicans and others are talking about us. Help nonprofits get reimbursed faster so they can welcome our communities as well, and then ensure that there's a true integration that is happening all at the same time. You take those steps, it will ensure that we all make sure that our ICE opportunities are not as bad as they are, but rather our immigrants are protected the way they need to be.
The migrant influx was mismanaged from the beginning, and Eric Adams set the tone for himself when he decried that immigrants were going to destroy New York City. That has never, ever happened in the history of New York City. Immigrants have only made New York City better. And in fact, if we were to have serious mass deportations, our economy would sink. Who is going to cook at our favorite restaurants? Who's going to take care of our kids? Who's going to clean homes? Who's going to do so many of the jobs that traditionally Americans do not do? That is the reality of our economy and the reality of our real public safety. We depend on each other. And so I want to not only make sure that the NYPD is not collaborating with ICE, they should not be serving as de facto border patrol. I want to also make sure that New Yorkers know their rights. It's incredible to me that in a town with around 7 law schools, at no point have we had a clinic to help our immigrants apply for the asylum that they are seeking. It is unconscionable that people are expected to be able to afford a very lengthy and expensive process, but nobody has bothered to help them actually engage in it. We need to create entry points into the economy for our migrants, just like former Mayor LaGuardia did. And that's what I want to do as mayor, actually help them incorporate faster so that they're able to provide for themselves and contribute to the coffers of our city, just like the rest of us.
This is the greatest immigrant city that the world has ever known. That's why the Statue of Liberty is in our harbor, and we've got to act like it. We have a responsibility to live up to that history. We've all got different stories. You know, I'm the highest ranking Jewish elected official in New York City government. What this city has been, after, watching my people have the shit kicked out of us for 2,000 years, to be able to come here and flourish and thrive, that comes with responsibility. And that means making sure that folks from Venezuela or Senegal, and whether you are Muslim or wherever you're coming from, this city stands up for you and your mayor stands up for you. So one, the mayor's got to make sure that the city staff and contractors in every single homeless shelter, in every single school, in every single public hospital, in every single city office know that they don't let ICE agents in, that this city's got sanctuary city laws, and that the city staff are expected to follow them. Eric Adams has failed to let New York workers know what their responsibilities are. He also defunded Action NYC, which is the resources to grassroots, community-based and legal services organizations that could provide legal services and case management to people in their languages and in their neighborhoods. It's not going to come to city offices for that help right now, so it's got to be available in the grassroots organizations if people are going to figure out how they get status and work authorization. And finally, the mayor should be leading right now our faith leaders and our unions and people of conscience out in the streets, showing how New Yorkers feel on this issue, that we are not going to let this president do this to us.
Thank you.
I sadly have to leave after this question, but it has been such a pleasure to be here with all of you. I serve on the cities committee in the New York State Assembly, and every year the mayor comes up to Albany for what is called Tin Cup Day. And this year I was given 3 minutes to ask my questions, and the first question I asked our mayor was whether he would inform immigrant New Yorkers across our city of his upholding of New York City law, which would mean that he would turn ICE agents away from New York City schools, hospitals, all city property, as well as the property of city contractors, unless they provided a judicial warrant signed by a judge. And this mayor refused to answer that question. He punted it to his law department. And it's indicative of a mayor who has opted for cowardice and collaboration in a moment when New Yorkers are looking for courage and conviction. It's indicative of a mayor who has failed immigrants time and time again, to the extent that my office partnered with a local community organization in Astoria named Melika, where we served asylum seekers, now more than 1,000 over the last years, signing them up for city services like Fair Fares and ID NYC, fulfilling a responsibility that this city should have been upholding. And finally, when we speak about immigration and the drop in attendance of up to 5% across the system, up to 20% at individual schools, and the detention, disappearing, and detaining of Mahmoud Khalil, a legal permanent resident holder, we also have to speak about the responsibility of New York City institutions in fighting back. Because Mahmoud Khalil wrote an email to Columbia University the day before saying he feared for his life, and he was met with nothing but silence. And he came home from an iftar with his wife, Noor, who is 8 months pregnant with the child they're going to bring into this world. And he was seized right there at his door. That is an example of what's unacceptable in the city. And we have to ensure that every institution, starting with city government, stands up and starts to fight back. Thank you so much.
I've been made aware that several of the candidates need to leave soon. So we will give the opportunity for those that need to leave to give 1 minute, close the statement, and then we'll continue with questions for the rest of the forum.
I'm going to be even quicker than 1 minute. I just want to say thank you so much for everything that you continue to do for CUNY. I want to thank all of the moderators for their assistance today and for their continued advocacy. And look, we are in very, very, very trying and unprecedented times in this city. And you're going to hear from a lot of us a lot of times and a lot of other candidates that are going to come before you and ask for your vote. But this isn't about any of us on this stage. This is about the future of our city. And so I ask you to continue to fight, not for us, but for the city, for the families and the students that you'll never get to meet, that you'll never get to interact with, but who are depending on you in this moment to fight for them. So thank you again, and I hope to be fighting shoulder to shoulder with you. Have a good evening.
Well, thank you for giving me this opportunity tonight. And look, this is an important mayoral election, but something is even more important. This Trump battle is going to go on beyond this race. And to the younger people who are here tonight, the students, it's going to fall on you. It really is. Because generationally, the work that you do is going to impact my young kids. And it really matters that you're here. You could be doing so many other things tonight, but you chose to be here to ask tough questions, to hold people accountable. I do think we're going to win this fight. I've seen it in my life, having been in politics for a long time. But it's not going to happen. Change is not going to happen without you and without your generation. And if you look at history, it usually happens that the next generation, the youngest generation, stops wars, stops bad actors. And that's on the kids who are at CUNY, the young people who are at CUNY. That's not to say we shouldn't have the most experienced mayor, but it's to say that I look forward to what you're going to do for our city. Thank you all very much.
For our next question. Oh,
Please. Just,
okay.
sorry.
Wow, losing them like
Yeah,
flies here.
Brad and Jessica gonna get the time right there.
Talk show.
And again, sorry for the departure. The funeral's out in Long Island. It's gonna take a little while. I'm coming to you with a different kind of vision. That we can address all that we're trying to do and do it well. We deserve better than what we have right now. I do believe we can address the true cost of living by having a guaranteed income at a living wage. We do believe that we can have universal child care. We fundamentally believe that we can focus on having a new vision when it comes to housing in particular, that we should not be using credit scores when it comes to rent and home ownership applications. We think about education and that civics, financial literacy, and mental health needs to be a part of that entire vision as well. And we can pay for all of this without raising tax on any person in this room by having a pied-à-terre tax for the individuals who do not have their primary residence here and are effectively just using empty spaces. Those are the individuals that can pay for all this. It is about addressing the absurd overtime that is happening at NYPD, the $1.4 billion that was happening you just learned about in the sex scandal itself. We can do all this and do this better. And as the only person who can say that I have White House experience, State House experience, and local experience, in this moment where today people are wondering if they're not going to have a job tonight, you have to ask yourself who is ready to fight back for you starting on January 1st of next year, and also who are the people that did not respect you enough to be in this room at all. I'm coming to you and saying, and I'm asking for your vote. My name is Michael Blake. I'm asking to be ranked number one when you vote on June 24th, and I ask for the opportunity to be your next mayor. God bless everybody.
So CUNY students are suffering because of the severe shortage of mental health counselors on campus. As a result, students, even those in crisis, have to wait weeks or even months for a meeting with a counselor. Furthermore, the counselor population does not reflect the tremendous racial, ethnic, and religious diversity of CUNY students. How would you address the lack of mental health counselors and resources on CUNY campuses and the lack of counselor diversity? For this question, we'll start with the comptroller.
You got a mental health plan.
I did, and I do, and I kind of already answered this question. You know, I really have thought about how it is that we can make New York City safer. And I know the knee-jerk reaction is always more police, but in reality, that is a response that historically has not made us safer, because we continue to see people who are suffering with cognitive deficiencies and people who are suffering with severe mental illness on our subways and in our streets. And the answer just can't be to throw them in jail and, lock them up and throw away the key. I actually think that there's nothing progressive and compassionate about depriving people of the services they need before they hurt themselves and or someone else. Right now, we have the biggest challenge of not having the places, the facilities available for us to actually place people in the appropriate healthcare facilities. And so investing in reopening a lot of those mental health facilities, which Andrew Cuomo closed, is paramount to building out a system that takes our mental health seriously. Look, I even thought coming out of the pandemic, we would see mental health wings in every city hospital. Destigmatizing mental health care is paramount in the Latino community and in many others. So making sure that people are able to access the care without having to answer questions from their nosy neighbor is really important. What's important is that we all talk to somebody about what we're struggling with. Thank you.
We have a mental health crisis in our city and our country that was bad before the pandemic, but the pandemic really took it to a whole new level. And now it's playing out in our K-12 schools, in our CUNY schools, on our streets and subways. And it's the responsibility of government to rise to this new crisis. I'm the son of a public elementary school guidance counselor, and the role mental health professionals play is very clear to me. So first, to this question, we've got to make sure that's a standard thing on every CUNY campus, and that folks have access to the mental health care that you need if you're going to be able to get through your education. Of course, one answer to make sure that we have social workers who speak the language of every student is to do the education at Silverman and elsewhere to make sure that that's happening. There are not nearly enough bilingual social workers, guidance counselors, and mental health professionals, and CUNY is the place to train them and then have those folks be actually offering those services on the other campuses and in our K-12 schools, where we've got to have guidance counselors and social workers, including ones who are in training at CUNY in every one of our public schools. And then, as Jessica said, on our streets and subways, I put out a plan for how we end street homelessness for people with serious mental illness. There are about 2,000 people who have serious mental illness sleeping on the streets of New York tonight, or in hospitals or Rikers, who will be homeless when they come out. Meanwhile, there's 2,500 vacant SRO and supportive housing units tonight in our city with the policy called Housing First, where you take people directly from the street into housing with services. We can end street homelessness for people with serious mental illness and live in a city that is safer and more humane.
Okay. Our next question. Currently, only 8% of CUNY buildings are in a state of good repair. Our faculty, staff, and students regularly deal with broken elevators and escalators, leaky ceilings, mold, and rodents. What's more, CUNY's efforts to reduce climate pollution are lagging behind other city agencies. Of the state's 15 highest emission public facilities, 3 belong to CUNY. Your question: what is your vision to repair, modernize, and decarbonize CUNY's campuses over your 4-year term? We'll start with Comptroller Lander.
So I was pleased to be out with Nancy Romer and several of you. I think I went to either 2 or 3 of the Green New Deal for CUNY policies. So thank you guys for organizing that. I'm really a nerd for city capital spending, I have to tell you. I spent my whole career in public office, 12 years in the city council, and now 4 years in the controller's office, figuring out how do we finance capital projects more effectively. I got a whole dashboard created to look at all of these failing infrastructure. I proposed a charter amendment to make sure we would be able to see what is the city infrastructure that's crumbling, where are there opportunities to invest it better. I issued the city's first social bonds, which is a real opportunity to raise new capital. The public finance and pension fund investments that we've done in the Comptroller's office have saved the city $2.5 billion. That's resources that we need to be investing strategically in the crumbling infrastructure of CUNY campuses. So I'll be working to make sure that money is invested, that that dashboard is telling you which projects it's being spent on, that we're getting it done on time and on budget, and that we're more mindful of reducing the carbon footprint as we go, so we don't just repair aging infrastructure in a way that continues to spew carbon into the atmosphere, but use this opportunity to bring down the carbon footprint of CUNY, to train people in good green jobs while doing it, and to leave a CUNY campus that CUNY campuses that are ready for our climate future and our students' future.
I believe, can I turn this off? Sorry. I believe that New York City needs to lead by example as a landlord, as someone, as an entity that is trying to inspire our residents to also be able to comply with local law 97. I'm a big fan of what we've been able to do in the state budget in order to bring geothermal into SUNY purchase. And for us to be able to dip into those opportunities here on college campuses, so that they can get off the grid, perhaps even sell energy back to the grid and make a little money, is really, really important. I've been pushing for a jobs and housing bill that is really about residential co-ops and helping them be able to comply with a lot of these mandates. But my plan is actually to hire a chief revenue officer that helps us think outside of the box and helps us generate revenue outside of the property tax reform that we need in New York City, and of course, the money that we're always asking Albany for. So we have to be able to meet these climate goals as soon as possible. We're very far behind on wind and energy storage. We are pretty much on pace with solar, but I believe that we need an executive who really understands the urgency of the moment and that is ready to kick all of these actions into high gear.
The final question is, how would you improve the governance structure and funding sources for CUNY to better serve its missions as the People's University?
I mentioned earlier that I'd like to restore municipal control to CUNY. That was what we had before the fiscal crisis, so that New York City elected officials, not just the mayor, council member, the council and others, appointed a majority of the board. Because when CUNY is controlled in a majority by the state, like a governor is just always focused elsewhere other than CUNY. But for a mayor and for me, CUNY, as I said at the beginning, is the most extraordinary vehicle for upward social mobility and inclusive democracy that we have. But that comes with first getting maintenance of effort on the state funds. So you got to go to Albany and say, we're going to keep the state funds coming and they have to grow over time with inflation so we can cover the bills. Let's use repair to add a little more. Let's use New Deal for CUNY to make sure we've got the resources. But then let us raise some additional money from the city budget. I think if a mayor were working closely with the university board, it'd actually be possible to raise some endowment dollars and really focus on the connections with our workforce development system, with our other higher ed institutions, with K-12 and our hospitals in the ways that I talked about, because so many CUNY graduates are professionals there. So now you've got it integrated into the lifeblood of the city in a way that's about governance, but also about what people are doing every day. And I think that's a model for having it well-funded, well-governed, and deeply integrated into the lifeblood of New York City.
I believe that CUNY is one of the best vehicles for upward mobility, of course, the labor movement being the other, and those go hand in hand. To to me, being able to dream of a CUNY that is free again is an opportunity that I wish I would have had. And I am a big believer that that changed after the majority of the students became students of color. And then all of a sudden there was no more money in order to help us out. I think the key is in the endowment dollars and making sure that we are thinking both upstream and downstream, working with employers to ensure that they are investing in an education and training system that will hopefully result in better job placement and therefore in a better return. Also, engaging our alumni is a guarantee in creating a better network of resources for the current students through mentorship programs and other opportunities that may arise. Overall, I think CUNY is devoid of a lot of love and a lot of dollars over a huge period of time. And in fact, I mentioned Hunter, where my sister studied earlier. I know Hunter and Brooklyn and City College are all really in need of serious capital dollars. So being able to give our students new bathrooms, which is something really basic and somehow overlooked, is a good place to start, but also making sure that there are state-of-the-art classrooms so that there is the best environment that's conducive to learning is a big responsibility for the mayor to be the best advocate when it comes to fighting for dollars from Albany. Thank you.
Before we finish and ask the speakers to make final closing comments, I want to invite all of you to stay for about 15 minutes afterward. We have serious decisions, and I'd be very interested in hearing from you, and maybe we could talk among ourselves for a while.
All right, we've concluded our question portion of our forum. And again, I want to thank you all for being in attendance, but we will each give you 1 minute for your closing statements, and we'll begin with Senator Jessica Ramos.
Muchas gracias. Well, thank you all for loving our city so much that you took time out of your personal schedule to be here and hear from all of us. I think all of us would be a vast improvement to the current leadership that we have at City Hall. We want a city hall that really does look like New York City and acts like New York City, grinds and hustles like New York City. We have to respect the hustle of our fellow neighbors. And I decided to throw my hat in this race to be the next mayor of the city of New York because I believe that my hustle in the legislature has been unmatched. I didn't just discover our affordability crisis upon announcing my candidacy. I have been fighting for affordability for New Yorkers my entire career. I've always said that being a state senator has only been an extension of my work in the labor movement, and I want to shout out my former boss, Faye Moore, who is in the corner over there. Because it is so important that we address the affordability issue, not just through raising the minimum wage like I did and tying it to inflation for the first time in the history of New York State. We need to get serious about universal child care. I've been able to increase eligibility for child care subsidies throughout my tenure in the Senate. This is about mental health services and having a better health care outcome for every single New Yorker. And this is about workforce housing and making sure that the people who make New York possible are actually able to live here, not only with low-income rentals, but even with modest equity home ownership opportunities. New Yorkers deserve to own a piece of their city. It cannot just be the filthy rich who are able to afford property taxes and afford to own a home here in New York. This is a city that has to be for everyone, and I intend on being the bridge that brings our 5 boroughs together, that brings our working class together to make sure that we have a prosperous future without leaving any New Yorker behind. I hope to gain your support.
Comptroller Lander.
I want to end by telling you the story of Yaris Lopez, who I mentioned before, because she's the New Yorker that has inspired me the most in the dark months we're living in. So Yaris was born in Honduras. She's Garifuna, Afro-Caribbean community, and they faced a lot of racism. When she was 10, gangs tried to burn down her house. So her mom scooped her and her sister up, and they walked here. And they made it, across the Darien Gap and across the border, and they wound up in the Bronx, homeless, sleeping in a park. Her mom took up with a partner who turned out to be an abuser. And so Yaris comes home one day in middle school to find her mom unconscious. And that could have been really where their story just spiraled downward. But she got them to the Bronx Family Justice Center, where a lawyer named Allison Cutler from New York Legal Assistance Group took their case, got them an order of protection, so now they're safe. Realized they had a sister who was unaccompanied minor, got her here as well. Got them status, so now they had asylum and were able to stay. And then was able to get them housing, so they had a place to live. And Yaris was so inspired by watching Allison argue her case in front of a judge that she said, hey, I want to be an immigration lawyer. And she transferred to the Bronx High School for Law and Community Service, from which she graduated as valedictorian just a couple of years after arriving here not speaking any English. And last spring, I got to watch Yaris graduate from CUNY's Lehman College. You could clap for that because it's pretty incredible. And she is now working as a paralegal at New York Legal Assistance Group, the same organization that saved her life and put her on this path. And she said to me, Controller, when you're an immigrant, you sometimes feel like you're a burden on everybody else. But when I'm filling out those applications for the new asylum seekers, I feel like I'm a good luck charm. And Yaris Lopez is a good luck charm for New York City in dark times. And a lot of that is just her grit and determination and her mom and what they did. But let's think about the institutions that made it possible, because the Bronx Family Justice Center is a city institution. And the New York, Community High School for Law and Community Service is a New York City institution. And that NILAG contract that got them those services, we fund that. And CUNY's Lehman College, you already know what it can do. And when you run those institutions well, invest in them, develop leadership, make sure they're run effectively, you make the next generation of Yaris Lopez's possible. That's who is sitting in this room. I'm grateful to you for it, and I look forward to being your partner in paying it forward. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you. Thank you to the candidates, those that stayed extra time, a special thank you. Thank you to the guests that also are here. Just a quick announcement. Remember that the Democratic primary election is on June 24th, and please go out to vote. NYPIR can register new voters, so please go see them if you're interested in being registered to vote. The deadline to register is April 19th.
And our annual March in March for CUNY is this month, Saturday the 29th. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.